Streets of Rage 4 has taken me by storm. I was in no way expecting this to be anywhere near as good as it is. As a matter of fact, I wasn't even planning on making a video about it. The only reason I even downloaded it was because I wanted a short, non-committal game to play while I powered through getting gameplay for my Avengers video.
I don't want you sneaking off to who knows where. Where are you going?
I thought we were done.
Ay, Dios mío.
I figured beat 'em ups don't take that long to beat and are usually some decent fun. Let's give it a shot. Here I am now, a month later, Avengers uninstalled from my PC and still playing Streets of Rage. The amount of love put into this project is palpable, and I've enjoyed so much of my time that I'm willing to say it's my second favorite beat 'em up. More on that later when my number 1 re-releases this holiday season.
Bread makes you fat.
Bread makes you fat?
Anyway, for now, let's focus on the subject at hand. Streets of Rage 4. Having never played a Streets of Rage game before, I wasn't quite sure what to expect. Beat 'em ups are often associated with mindless button mashing, but that's very far from the case in this one. Success is heavily reliant on baiting out enemy moves and capitalizing on their openings. If you're just mashing out your basic combo whenever you can, you're A, wasting a ton of damage potential, and B, begging to get hit by a lurking enemy. With how technical the game is, it's almost equal parts 2D fighter and beat 'em up. You literally play footsies with the enemies to provoke them into attacking you. Granted, you should almost always be doing it on the Y-axis, but the same principles apply. Add in some timing mechanics like teching throws and stun locking enemies, and you've got a game that can be just as technical as any traditional fighter. Character design is another area where Streets of Rage shares a few similarities to fighting games. In other beat 'em ups, you can probably pick a random character and immediately start kicking ass, but it's gonna take some practice to come up with optimized combos and strategies for each one here. My first playthrough was as Cherry, the speedy character in the core roster and the only one of the 5 that has sprinting. Then I played as Floyd, a slow, hard-hitting grappler. I was constantly getting hit by moves that I had no trouble dodging as Cherry, since Floyd has a much slower walk speed and bigger hitbox. Eventually I got tired of dying to grunts and hit up some Reddit posts where I found that his aerial special doubles as a great tool for mobility. This mishap can mostly be chalked up to me not being familiar with Streets of Rage's mechanics, but there are a lot of little character-specific things like this to learn throughout the roster. There are 16 characters in total, with 11 of them being unlockable retro characters almost directly lifted from their respective Streets of Rage games. I'm all for showing some love to old school games, and as cool as it is to be able to play as retro characters in all of their former glory, I do wish there was more of a focus on Streets of Rage 4 characters. I think I would have rather seen these two fully fleshed out than have all of these retro characters. The original Streets of Rage 1 characters don't even have special moves, so while they're a fun novelty, they heavily conflict with some of the game's core mechanics. I was really confused and a little annoyed when I found out that there was no blocking in Streets of Rage 4, but I think it actually complements the game's mechanical combat. Your primary defensive option here is good old positioning, and I would argue that this is probably the most important part of the game. You're going to be using the Y-axis to dodge and bait out most enemy attacks, and in general you always want to be moving. A block button would slow down the pace of the game tremendously, and I can see why they opted not to include it. If you get swarmed by enemies or you don't think you'll be able to move out of the way of an attack, every character's neutral special has significant iframes and can be used to get enemies off of you. Think of it like a parry. Some throws also have iframes, but seeing as how you have to grab an enemy before you can take advantage of them, the neutral special is going to be your best bet most of the time. Along with the defensive neutral special, characters have an aerial and side special. They all temporarily take away from your health bar, but you can regen the lost health by landing normal attacks. This is one of my favorite parts of the game, and I think it's such good game design. At first I thought it meant that you shouldn't use specials unless you absolutely need to, but really this is all about resource management. You can and at some point will use a special move a few times in a row, and that's perfectly fine since you can regen all of the lost health if you're careful. But on the other side of the coin, this also means that if you get too comfortable spamming attacks, you can literally be a jab away from losing your entire health bar. There's always some micro decision making because of this system. You'll find yourself wondering if it's worth extending a combo to finish off a health bar, or if it's smarter to focus on regaining your lost health. And ultimately, it's up to you. I was really conservative with special moves at first, but once I got familiar with the levels and wanted to start going for high scores, I found myself using specials a lot to protect myself and extend combos. Player choice is something that Streets of Rage 4 does really well, but we'll talk about that more later on in the video. Because of how important positioning is, the overall lack of mobility in the cast is a little disappointing. While I was wrong about Floyd not having any, there are more than a few characters that don't have any real form of advanced movement. Some of the characters' move speed is so slow that it feels near impossible to get out of the way of certain moves on reaction, and even if you can get out of the way, you definitely won't be able to get back to the enemy quick enough to punish them. Only half of the roster is able to dash or sprint, which is a bummer because in 3, every character had some form of mobility. Taking that away honestly feels like kind of a step back here. In my opinion, the game only gets better with more mobility. It becomes more accessible to newer players, and more experienced players can use it to do things like keep combos going for longer. Even if they don't bring back universal sprinting, rolling to traverse the Y-axis was a great addition in 3 and would solve a majority of the mobility issues in this one. I knocked Avengers for having bad enemy design, but we're on the complete other end of the spectrum here. Almost every enemy is designed to have a distinct purpose and weakness, and they all have names. I don't know why, but I really like that they have names. Most of them have a quick basic attack that they'll use if you get too close, and a more powerful signature move with an obvious tell so you have time to prepare for it. Enemies that grab you will blink red a couple times before they approach you. Victorias will throw mollies at you, and I used to have a lot of trouble dealing with them until I realized you could catch their projectiles mid-air and return fire. And Gaussias are pretty basic enemies but can run at you with knives. An aerial attack can easily take care of them.
Let me see what you have!
No!
Every enemy has something special about them, and you aren't going to learn the best strategies for beating them until you've done a couple run-throughs of the game. In my opinion, that's when it starts to get really fun. Unfortunately, the art and enemy design kinda goes out of the window if there are a lot of enemies on screen at once. It doesn't matter if you know how to counter all of these guys. When there are 6 of them flying, rolling, and running at you in staggered intervals, there isn't much you can do besides spam your neutral special. For this reason, I think the game is at its best on hard. There are just enough enemies to make the levels challenging, but still feel balanced. Mania mode feels more like a survival game than anything, and there are a couple levels that are just straight up not fun. It legit took me 3 hours to beat the last level on Mania.
Level with me? Did we suck?
Yeah, we're terrible.
The calculated combat that takes place in the lower difficulties quickly turns to all-out chaos in this mode. And while my goal is usually to maximize score, on Mania, I'm happy to make it to the end of the stage. Grabbing is probably my biggest overall complaint with the combat. It's automatic,
Hydromatic. Ultramatic. Why, it could be.
so much better. Just walking close enough to an enemy will start your grab, and on paper this doesn't sound like much of an issue, but in practice it causes a lot of problems while you're fighting. I can't tell you how many times I've died trying to get to some food that a bunch of enemies were standing on, or woken up into a grab and been punished for it. Another weird design decision is that some characters' back throws change based on whatever direction the enemy is facing, so if you grab them from behind you'll get more of a slam, but if they're facing you you'll toss them behind you. Considering that there are only forward and backward throws from grabbing, I think it would have been smarter to make a third down throw to do the slam. I'm sure I don't need to tell you this because you've been looking at it for this entire video, but the art style for this game is fantastic. After every stage you're treated to a comic style cutscene. They aren't voice acted and the story isn't anything groundbreaking, but the panels are nice to look at.
Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
But what caught me by surprise were the stage backgrounds. It's easy to overlook them when you're focused on playing, but watching back through my gameplay I noticed that there's a lot of detail in them. The chaos going on in the background of Estel's stage, and the final bosses just casually watching your fight with Max were two of my favorites. Let's also take a moment to appreciate the top-notch character animations. Little flourishes like Floyd sticking out his tongue, and Cherry almost instantaneously tossing and catching her pick during their neutral specials help give a lot of life to the characters. Lately, I've been paying more attention to concept art when it's available in a game, and there's a ton of it here. Everything from stages to alternate character designs to unused enemies is here for you when you want to break from the constant action. And the soundtrack is equally on par with the visuals here. It is 2 hours of straight bangers. Every stage and boss has its own unique music, and they've done an excellent job of matching the music to the vibes of the stages. Listen for yourself. Don't these songs match these boss fights perfectly? There are 12 stages in total, and a casual run through of the game will probably take you around an hour and a half, although I have seen it done in less than an hour by some speedrunners. There's classic arcade mode if you want to do a full playthrough in one sitting, chapter select if you need to practice a specific stage, boss rush, and a battle mode if that's your thing. I'm okay with not getting infinite comboed by someone who has 200 hours in the game though. You can play through any part of the game with a friend or random if you're lucky enough to find someone playing online. I've only managed to get into one co-op lobby and the connection was pretty spotty, which causes some issues since the gameplay is so precise, but it was still a lot of fun. Once you've done a few run-throughs to get familiar with the mechanics and levels, the game naturally transitions into a second phase of trying to perfect each level and get that S rank. Most of your score is going to come from racking up big combos throughout a level. The scoring system is kinda weird, but this video does a really good job of explaining it. I'll link it in the description. Basically, all of your score is based off of the damage you deal, not the number of hits in a combo. You get flat points added to your total just for landing attacks, but comboing builds up a bonus pot that adds to your total once the combo is finished. The bigger the combo, the more points you get when it's over. Bonus points grow exponentially, so one 100 hit combo is better than 4 25 hit combos. The counter will be solid until you go a few seconds without landing a hit, then it will start blinking. If you get hit while the counter is blinking, the combo stops, but the points are still added to your total. If you get hit when the number is solid,
you get nothing! You lose!
The solid blinking combo meter is almost a super sick mechanic since it creates a risk-reward scenario when you start to get those really high combos. Should you try to keep the combo going for even more points, or chill out for a second to be safe? But in practice, this actually causes a lot of headaches and
wait for it, wait for it, wait for it, wait for it.
Rage for players that want to go for high scores. You could manage to perfectly combo the first 5 screens of a stage and get hit by a diamond that started to jump off screen, and now you have absolutely nothing to show for it. Obviously, it sucks that you don't get the points, but this also inadvertently makes the level harder since you get an extra life every 8,000 points, and all of those potential points are now gone. The fact that you get nothing for a botched combo kinda makes it feel like the risk outweighs the reward. And if I'm not specifically trying to maximize my score, it's almost never worth it to hold on to a long combo. If you got maybe 60 or 70% of the total points, I think the system would feel a lot better. This way, there's still a downside to getting greedy or messing up, but it's not a complete loss. Aside from hitting enemies, there are a couple other cool things you can do to increase your score or keep a combo going. Eating while at full health directly adds points to your total. So if you're feeling confident, you can choose to eat a food item when you don't need it for a small bonus instead of saving it to potentially save your life. Oh, and did I mention that you could change the food items? Completely unnecessary, it does nothing to impact gameplay, but still a really fun feature. Anyway, every character has a star move. These are often saved for boss fights or a particularly hard section of a stage since they do massive damage and are great for wave clearing. But if you hold on to them until the end of the level, you'll get a small bonus for every star that you have. Lastly, you can hit inanimate objects or sometimes dead enemies and pick up consumables to keep a combo going. Once you get familiar with a stage, it's fun to come up with routes where picking up an apple or hitting a box allows you to keep a combo going that otherwise wouldn't be possible. Mastery over time is where Streets of Rage, in my opinion, really shines. If you watch high scoring or speed runs of this game, the precision at which people maneuver and fight through these stages is astounding. But with simple controls and a relatively low barrier to entry, it can be just as fun for people wanting a casual game to play while they relax. There's confirmed DLC on the way, but no ETA on it, and nobody knows exactly what it is. Could be new characters, stages, or enemies, but I'm betting it's gonna be all three. Fingers crossed, I finally get to play as Estel. You might think Streets of Rage 4 is a tad on the pricey side, coming in at $25 US, but for the amount of work put into this thing, I think that's more than a fair price. If you're looking for a game with a badass soundtrack, stunning visuals, and crisp gameplay, look no further. Streets of Rage 4 is it. Oh, and .emu, if you're listening, hurry the fuck up and finish Windjammers 2.